Hello, everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. My name is Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. This week, we have a lot of Superman stuff to actually talk about. James Gunn has been very upfront, as he often is, about what is and isn't canon in his new DCU and all this stuff, and he shared out a series of images from different Superman media that he's taking into using as inspiration for his version of Superman. It used to be called Superman Legacy. Now it's just called Superman, which I think is probably a good idea. And it got us thinking about why is it so hard to adapt Superman for a modern audience? Because like you see those images and you're like, yeah, that's what Superman is. But for the last decade or more, really since Richard Donner, the first one, like it has been really tough. So here to talk to me about Superman who else? It's the person that always comes on to talk about comic book stuff. Longtime Nerdist writer, comic book aficionado, and friend of mine, Eric Diaz. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So yeah, I think so for a long time, I was very pro Batman, very anti Superman when I was an iconoclastic youth, and I think that is not anti Superman because he did anything, but everyone, there were people in my school who were like, Batman has no powers, like he's lame. I'm like, what are you talking about? Batman's the best and all this stuff, and so I was anti Superman because of that. And then once I got to become a learned adult, I was like, no, Superman's actually super awesome, but I actually think more people were in the camp and still are in the camp that I was when I was in high school. And that makes it much more, I think it's an easier lift to adapt Batman to whatever you want, because Batman is just inherently more versatile than Superman and other superheroes. So like if you make a good Batman movie, great, good for you. Like I think, we've talked about Matt Reeves's Batman is great. A lot of the Nolan stuff works. I mean, but you can't apply the Nolan tropes or the Nolan kind of sensibilities to most other superheroes. I feel like only Batman's the one to do that with. And I think that's where a lot of the problems have lied. So first, before we get into what James Gunn was actually talking about, we'll go through each of his different share outs and kind of just talk about what we think he can pull from those. What is your history? Because you're DC fan aficionado, like long time, but like, what is your Superman specific history?
I mean, I didn't buy Superman comics probably until the mid 80s when when the post Crisis on Infinite Earths reboot happened. I mean, of course I was super aware of Superman from the movies and Super Friends and toys and all that. And I liked Superman, but I didn't really read the comics.
Yeah.
John Byrne's reboot really was incredible for the time. Like he really kind of stripped away a lot of the things that seemed cheesier about him in that era, and he made it more like the movie. Like it felt Lois was much more like Margot Kidder's Lois. That Lex is the Lex that we all love now, when he decided that, like, if you're a criminal genius, why are you living in the sewers? Like why aren't you the richest man in the world? And he created this kind of Salieri, Mozart, Amadeus kind of rivalry between the two of them that I think is one of the best rivalries. There really wasn't a reason for Luthor to hate Superman pre-Crisis that way. Do you know what I'm saying? Like he was just like, you made my hair fall out. Like, well, you're genius, make it grow back. Like, you know what I mean? It was stupid. Yeah. Whereas I love the concept of, I'm the richest, most powerful man in the world. I have everything, but the only thing I can't be you. Like I don't have this innate power and ability to make people love me for being a good person. So this hatred that he has for him, it's a great dynamic. So that's when I really started to get into Superman comics. And then after Byrne left, the 90s was just a really good Superman era, like what they call the triangle era, because they had a little triangle on each Superman comic that would let you know throughout the year, like where every issue fell between the different series. There was Adventures of Superman and Action Comics, and like it was one long continuous story told through different creative teams. And those were really, really great years for the character. And they really made him, because at this era, he told Lois that, Clark and they dropped that after almost 50 years or, and it created this whole new dynamic for the character, and having this like, you know, partner in crime. And it was like, you know, I don't, I'm trying to think of like a modern equivalent of like a husband-wife team, you know what I mean? And it was just great. Those comics were really
Mhm.
good. So that's when I became a fan of Superman comics. And there were a lot of good comics that came out of that like late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, you know, Superman era. So, but I mean, I've always liked the character. I have a little bit of side eye toward people who tell me like they hate Superman. Like, I
Yeah,
get if he's not your favorite, but a
sure.
lot of comic fans are like, I hate Superman. I'm like, why? He just does good things. Like, why do you hate that? Like, and it's because,
Yeah.
and I think, I suspect it's because if they had that kind of power, they wouldn't. That's my judgment. Like,
Yeah.
you just don't accept that someone who's that powerful would just do good things. And
Yeah. I mean, ultimately that comes down to like, you know, to get real philosophical, but it's like the Locke versus Hobbes, like what is humanity? Like if you inherently think humanity is unjust and corrupt, then you don't like there is nothing in Superman that you can relate to because
right,
he is an outsider with powers. He should, you know, a different version of him, which is why they've overdone that trope a million times, where
yeah,
like, you know, the conqueror Superman or Lord Superman, or like, you know, the injustice version,
yeah,
who is like the evil conqueror. But he doesn't do that because he was raised. This is a very nature versus nurture debate as well. Because the Kents were such good people,
yeah,
they instilled such goodness into young Clark. Because the people of Krypton kind of suck. Like we've seen that
right.
over the years,
Except for Jor-El, yeah, pretty
except for
much.
Jor-El, yeah. But so he basically had these his only, and I guess, you know, Kara as well. But uh, this these kind of idealized versions of what a person ought to be. Somebody with, I mean, it's essentially with great powers comes great responsibility, but on a much kind of grander scale, because, you know, he could do all these things but he doesn't. He's a generally good person, and so like, who also happens to be a you know, faster than a speeding bullet and all that stuff. I find that nowadays it's like that is what I want from a superhero comic. Is
Yeah,
like, I'm kind of over this like gruff anti-hero stuff. Like Batman gets a pass, but even Batman, if it's too grimdark, I don't care for it.
yeah,
Um, but Superman can't be that. Like he has to be light
right.
and hopeful and awe-inspiring. That's why the first Richard Donner movie is so great.
Hmm.
Thereafter, especially like the Richard Lester redo of Superman 2 and all that stuff,
Hmm.
they made it a joke. They made it silly.
Yeah.
But that first one is not silly. It is
No,
like,
there's silly aspects to it, but not.
right.
Superman isn't silly.
No, right.
Lex
Like,
is, but
yeah. Right. Like the movie can be silly, but like
yeah.
you got to take Superman, like, you know, there's a reason that tagline is "You'll believe a man can fly." Like you have to be, you
Mhm.
have to kind of allow yourself to believe that aspect of it in order to, you know, for him to kind of stand out in the way that
Yeah.
he needs to. And I do feel like there's a lot of people who just say, "Oh, he's a Boy Scout," but you know,
There are
if
real
all
Boy
you've
Scouts.
yeah,
There are
if
people
all
who
you've
just do
read,
good.
that's why something like BVS, Batman v Superman,
Mm.
Dawn of Justice, I think is, and also Man of Steel for that matter. But like, if the only thing you know about Superman is the way Superman is depicted in The Dark Knight Returns, and then well, what's the other thing about him? Oh, I think he died because of Doomsday.
Right.
Oh, if that's all you know, then that's the movie for you. But that's not what Superman is generally.
No, like Batman is a lot more malleable than Superman is. Like Batman
Mm,
can be goofy, Batman can be super dark. For whatever reason, Superman is very set in stone. I think Spider-Man is a little bit too. Like what they
sure.
are is very like, no, it's this, you know. And when you stray from it, people tend to react. I mean, I feel Superman's the only character whose like costume is almost untouchable. Like people don't really like when you take away the red underwear.
Yeah.
Like they don't like
Even
when
that.
like even that when they did the new 52 design and they gave him a collar, people like Superman doesn't have a collar. I can't imagine any other superhero who's just mildly tweaked in that way where people have this kind of reaction. There's something about him that's just, you know, they got it right almost from the get-go, although his costume did change, but
Yeah. And they've
by
tried.
the mid
Yeah.
40s, that's kind of what the costume was and stayed that way for 70 years,
Yeah. Well, that's what, like, he is an emblem, like,
Yeah.
more so than Batman is.
Yeah.
I find so much of Batman's like whole thing more interesting. And I think that like Gotham City and all the rogues are really interesting. And I think Batman himself is really interesting. But like, and that's, I think ultimately is why so many people have gotten Superman incorrect in films and just elsewhere. And why I'm hopeful that James Gunn will do it the properly is because you have to get the very specific like ethos of a Superman comic, which is that no matter what's going on in the world, he's essentially, DC's Captain America. Like
Yes.
he
Yeah.
is unwaveringly positive as a character. And that's why
Yeah.
people lost their mind during Secret Empire a few years ago when, it was an alternate version of you're a clone or whatever of Cap,
Yeah.
but like Cap can't be pro Hydra, cannot.
Right. That
Um,
got overblown for me. I'm like, people, have you been reading comics
I know
starting
it's not like that's going to
yesterday?
stay that way forever,
Like,
but
you realize it's a clone or some alt timeline thing, right? No.
right. Yeah.
Like,
It's
come
just there for
on.
the shock. But
Yeah.
like, and for some reason, Superman has just become, oh, he's the bad guy in Injustice or whatever. Or
Well, I
like,
mean, and then the Superman archetype what is Homelander? What is
yeah.
Omni-Man? The evil, the idea that the evil Superman has become more popular than Superman irks me, even though
Mm-hmm.
those shows I really like and I
Right.
understand what they're doing. I feel that's why James Gunn Superman is super needed right now, because it's like, can we please have a positive depiction and not just a subversion? I don't want any more subversions of Superman. For like, we need a moratorium. Like, as much as I adore The Boys and everything it's doing
Sure.
and what it's saying, like, we need just the idea that, like, yes, you can have all of this power, and just because you're a good person, you do the right thing with it. There doesn't have to be some kind of twisted motivation. There doesn't have to be tragedy. I think with Superman, it's like, whether Ma and Pa Kent are dead or not, because that comes and goes in the mythology, he's still Superman. He didn't
Right.
need them to die to be, a hero.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah. I really, and I think James Gunn kind of knows that. Like, I just get the sense that he knows that this is the time to do that version of Superman.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why, like, it's just absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, now is the time for that version of Superman. And also, if you are going to set up a brand new cinematic version of the DC Comics universe, you simply must make Superman your priority.
Yep.
Batman will find his audience and find the
Yeah.
voice and everything like that. I think it's interesting that they're going with the Grant Morrison, like son of Batman route. I think that's
Yep.
smart because that's something we haven't seen. We've seen young Batman a million times. We've
Yep.
seen older Batman with a son that he didn't know he had. I think that's way more interesting right now. But
Yeah.
you put all of your efforts into making Superman work, because if Superman doesn't work,
Yep.
then it's just like, well, we saw that. I mean, the DCEU never had a strong central figure because it
Killed him.
killed him right away. And it also, like, in the entire Man of Steel, which is, I don't think a bad movie, but I do not like the third act because, like, yeah, Superman doesn't save anybody. Like,
It doesn't save anybody. I do like the movie. I mean, I like it less and less over the years,
sure.
more to do with the cult around the movie
Yeah.
than the movie itself. The movie itself, I sort of feel, is in this weird camp that Batman Returns in, which is like, Batman Returns is not really a Batman movie. It's a Tim Burton movie where he uses Batman iconography to deal with Tim Burton things.
Yes.
Man of Steel is an alien invasion movie that uses Superman, archetypes and, character names. As an alien invasion movie, I think it kind of rocks.
Yeah.
Like, it's a good alien invasion movie. It's not a great Superman movie.
Mm-mm.
There just hasn't. And then, this goes back to Superman Returns. They didn't nail that one either, even though Brandon Routh is a good Superman
Mm-hmm.
and would have been. But like, both of those movies, like, did opposite mistakes. Like, Superman Returns, like, you want to see him fight somebody. You do want to see that, because
Yeah.
it's Superman and it's the modern. It was the modern CGI era. We could see this now, and they didn't give us that. They did give us the really cool him saving a plane scene, which is what you needed in Man of Steel. Like
Right.
both of those movies didn't. They needed to have both of those elements, and neither of them did. You know what I'm saying? Like Man of Steel went all in on the fighting and none of the saving.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like you need to have both. Like we want to see him beat up Brainiac, but we also want to see him save civilians. It's and be romantic,
Yeah.
and be charismatic and nice, and he's the guy you want to be or be friends with or date, or that's who Superman is. He's everybody's type. You know what I mean? Like, so that I just hope James Gunn knows that. But I really do trust him.
I do
Like,
too. Yeah.
like
I mean, to say nothing of the Guardians movies, which like he kind of had more runway with those because those were not like super well-known characters, but like
yeah.
that the Suicide Squad movie is so good.
Yep.
It's somehow it's my favorite DCEU movie, which is a sequel to my least favorite DCEU movie.
Isn't that crazy?
Somehow, yeah.
Right. He just gets, and he knows. I mean, we'll get to it, but like when you see all of the images and comics he's referencing, it's like, yeah, that's right. I saw someone online complain. It's like, is anybody upset that he just didn't go out of the box? I'm like, no, I don't want him to go out of the box.
Inside the box.
Be inside the box right now. Like once you get the box hasn't been done right in 45 years with Superman on screen on the big screen. So no, I don't want him to like throw out some weird, comic that isn't quintessential Superman. Like, I'm glad that he's doing ones that are like, yep, that's Superman.
Yeah, it's super. Like you wrote you've been writing a series for us, which is like the X best runs of various characters and stuff like that. And your X-Men stuff and your Batman stuff, I largely agreed with before even reading it. I was just like, yep, these are the ones that I know of. Superman, I don't know as well, just across the board. Like you, I didn't grow up reading Superman comics. I watched Super Friends and I watched the animated series and that kind of stuff. But I wasn't like steeped in the comics of it. And so I've been slowly picking up stuff, and like a lot of those ones that you wrote about months ago, like sometime last year, are the ones that are reference, or that Gunn said he's using as, and it's like there's a reason that there's so much overlap, and it's not just that you and Gunn have the same tastes. It's that is essentially what Superman needs to be, are these arcs.
Yes.
The death and return of Superman was a huge thing, but as great as those comics were that decade, and also other than maybe the X stuff, which kind of goes off the rails at a certain point, Superman is one of the rare comic book characters that has a good 90s.
He really does have a good 90s for the most part, till later on, like towards the end of the decade. But those 90s comics, when they're like what they call it, the Triangle era. Like when you had so many really good creatives working on those books, and those were really good comics, and it was weekly. It was every week you'd have a new Superman comic. It was a one continuing story for the character in a way that Batman wasn't. Batman was very much like Detective was its own story, and Batman was its own story, and like they were all sort of separate. But like Superman was one, continuing story about Lois and Clark, because she was a big character because by that point she was in on the secret. They were about to get married, all of that, and it was some great comics. It was I wish they would collect a lot more of those. I mean, they have the death and return of Superman, but there's a lot more to that era,
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, because that is the stuff I really want to try to get into. Because that hasn't been collected, I haven't really.
It's hard. It's hard because again, it was like a weekly comic. Yeah. So imagine how many comics that is to collect into. I was a little tickled because when I did that article, I think I put that the Triangle era is the best Superman era. Yeah, and one of the Superman and Lois writers was like retweeted that and was so happy. He was like, I for sure thought it was going to be something else, and the Triangle era is the best. And I'm like, right, it is. It was like, it's so great, and having someone from the Superman writers acknowledge that made me happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't realize that had happened. So yeah, let's go through so the James Gunn stuff. First of all, we did know, and this wasn't part of it, but he mentioned it in the thread, that Donner's Superman movie from 1978, like that's the first modern superhero movie. Like it is incredibly influential in a lot of ways.
Oh
And so I
yeah.
think using that as your jumping off point is like incredibly smart, because that's what you want to try to elicit with your version of the character.
Yeah, and it's also all the MCU movies use that. There's an anecdote from Kevin Feige, I think it's in one of the books about Marvel, that he says before the production of every Marvel movie, he makes cast, crew, director watch Superman the movie, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
"This is what we want to do. Like, this is always the template for a superhero movie." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's why so many of those are good." Like because he understands that, and I'm sure that Gunn does too. Like clearly, like there are things about it that don't work anymore. I don't think Gunn likes the Gene Hackman Luthor and has said so, that's not a route he wants to go with Luthor.
Sure.
But the other stuff, I mean, the Krypton stuff, like the Smallville stuff, all the lead up to him going to the fortress is fantastic. So yeah, smart of him to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, the Smallville stuff especially, like it like looks great, and there's like there's a gauziness to that movie that I think
Yes.
is like inherent to the old Hollywood style that it's going for.
Yep.
It's like, because I mean, you can, for good or ill, like Superman is sort of like he's a 30s 40s character. Like it's harder
Yeah.
to update that to the modern age sensibility wise. But I think like that movie really does a good job of splitting the difference. Like there's clearly
Yep.
70s stuff in it, but then there's also like just the traditional. So yeah, that's a great one to start with, and I'm glad for that. But obviously, let's get into the more kind of esoteric stuff, or the more comics focused stuff. By the way, every time James Gunn mentions specific comics, like the sales go like off the
Yep.
charts. So
Yep.
the first image was, of course, just the image of Superman breaking chains around his chest from Superman #1 from 1940. That seems like a no-brainer to me. That's like, let's go back to
Yep.
the origins of the character from Simon and Schuster.
Yep.
Next, we have All-Star Superman. Now, this was one that he called out in that first initial YouTube video, kind of like announcing the entire new DCU. I hadn't read it. And I have since, and it's so stinking good. Like I know it's kind of like Superman at the end of a version of his life, spoilers. But it's like what if he were Hercules having to do various trials and stuff. And
Yeah.
I think it's perfect. I think it's a perfect Superman story.
Yeah. All-Star Superman is fantastic. It is kind of the quintessential Superman story of the modern era, like as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
The
And
art's great.
mm-hmm.
The writing is great. It's got everything. It's very Silver Age, but with a modern sensibility to it. It's yeah, and it has that one. He used the panel, I think, of him saving the girl from jumping off the building. Right.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's everything Superman needs to be, like a comforting presence to convince you that like it's the life is worth living. You know what I'm saying? Like that panel. I hope if they recreate a panel from any comic, I hope it's that one.
Honestly, yeah, because like for those who haven't seen it, it's you say saves a girl from jumping off a building.
Well, yeah, convinces her not to jump.
Right. You might think that he swoops in and saves her, but literally, she drops her phone off the thing. She's crying. She's going to jump. Superman appears behind her and says, "Your doctor really did get held up, Reagan. It's never as bad as it seems. You're much stronger than you think you are. Trust me." And then he just gives her a hug, and that's the end. And that's Superman, man. Like,
right? That's Superman right there.
Like, he's just a good hero character. He's not,
yeah.
He doesn't save people because I'm a god and I must, all this stuff
Yeah.
that drove me nuts about BVS and Man of Steel first to a certain degree, but like, he's just like, oh, I got to save all these people. Like, it's just, he's so put upon.
It's not a burden for him.
No, it is his reason for existing. Like,
yep.
He's not mad about it. This is my life, and that's what he does. So the other great thing about All-Star Superman is so the art is by Frank Quitely, who has worked many times with Grant Morrison, specifically on their Batman and Robin run for a while. But what I think is really great that Frank Quitely does is that when this Superman, who is huge, he's a giant of a guy. When he is Clark Kent, he puts him in baggy, oversized suits, and he kind of like slouches over. He looks like a dork.
Yes.
It's not like as immediately clear. Oh, this is just. I mean, because like Henry Cavill with glasses on is still just Superman. You know what I
I
mean?
mean,
Like,
that's the glasses Superman. It's the hardest part of the mythology to make modern and
mhm,
believable. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I get that. That's part of it. John Byrne in the 80s had a really good explanation. He had a way to keep that while making it not as silly, which was nobody really knows what Superman looks like because when he's Superman, he's always sort of vibrating at this frequency that no one can get a really good photo
sure. Yeah.
or video of him. So they know that he's a tall white guy with dark hair and the costume, but like there's never good photo evidence. So therefore, people see Clark Kent on the street and nobody's like, "Wow, you look like Superman," because nobody really has a good idea. That doesn't work as much anymore because of digital. You know what I'm saying? Like in the
Yeah.
80s, you could say that because there wasn't digital cameras, there wasn't all of this software to make that work. But there has to be a way to make that work. I think it's
Mhm.
just always harder when you have characters like Lois and Jimmy who are friends with both characters.
Yeah.
Like you could convince the world that like, hey, I just look like that Superman guy, and people will be like, okay, whatever. You have them both show up at the same time, and no one will think about it again. But like when it's his friends who are friends with both of those people, that's when it gets tough
Yeah.
and more unbelievable. As
And
much as I love Superman and Lois, the show, the idea that his own kids didn't know I'm like, come on. Like, don't you watch TV? You know who Superman is.
yeah.
It's not weird that he looks like your dad.
Yeah. It's like, hey, it looks exactly like my father, who I see
Yeah.
daily. Yeah.
Who I see daily.
I agree. That is a bit silly. And also they've done the face vibration thing on the Flash TV show. So it's not like on the one
Right.
hand, it's like, well, you can get away with that. But on the other hand, it's like, well, they did just do that on the Flash TV show.
They
So
did. I forgot that they did that. And I like that. I thought that made sense. And even
yeah.
then he didn't even need it. He had a mask. So it was more like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I think there needs to be something like that. At least in the, like, we don't know if in this version, Lois is going to figure out that it's Superman. Like, we don't know. It's early in his career, but I don't believe it's origin story.
no,
In
it's
fact,
not an
it's not. It
origin.
says specifically it's not. So it's possible she already knows, or it's possible she's going to find out in this movie. Whatever,
Right.
it's okay. Great. If you haven't read All Star Superman, it's what is it? 10 issues. I think it's completely
I think
maybe
it's
12
12
issues.
issues. It was
Yeah.
12. It was supposed to be a year, but it took like 3. um, it's all collected. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a particularly thick book.
No.
It'll take you, a night or two if you're just kind of casually reading.
Mm-hmm.
It's
There's an
but it's great.
animated adaptation that's not great.
I haven't watched that because I heard it
They
wasn't
cut
good.
out too much stuff. It's just you can't do that story in 70 minutes.
No.
Yeah.
Next up is Max Fleischer Superman, which again makes perfect sense, like from a
Oh,
visual standpoint.
yeah.
Is that a happy sigh or a sad
Oh
sigh?
no, that's a happy side. That's like
Okay.
those are great.
Yeah.
Those are. I mean, as you know, there's no Batman the Animated Series without those
No,
Fleischer
absolutely not. Yeah.
Superman. I mean, I think those are fantastic. Just visually, they're important to Superman lore overall because that's where he started flying.
hmm
Before leaping tall buildings, that's as much as he could do. He could jump really high and punch something.
Yeah.
Then the cartoons was like, let's just take that to the next visual level and have him fly. The comics quickly followed suit. And they're just the action's fantastic. Lois is awesome in those.
Oh yeah.
Like she is just completely like, Rosie the Riveter era. This is like that era when women were, the boys were off at war and they had to take on men's jobs, and Lois is super go-get. I love that Lois. And it's not the Lois of 10 years later. I mean, if you look at Lois after that era, it's all about like, I need Superman to marry me. I need to,
Yeah.
all of this. Not that Lois. And I hope that they draw inspiration from that. And especially the action stuff. The action in that is great. I mean, there's a lot of problematic stuff. It's World War II.
Yeah.
So like,
Oh yeah. Well, they recently remastered all of them and put them out on Blu-ray, and I had never watched all of them. I'd seen quite a few of them, but I never actually
Yeah.
watched all of them until this release. And there's definitely some that are like that are propaganda films. Let's
they're
just say that.
propaganda films. Yeah. They're propaganda World War II films. Yeah.
But yeah, the first one and the Superman against the mechanical men are two of the best like Superman stories just ever, and I think visually like that is a great indicator of hopefully what Gunn and team are going for, where it's like it's big Art Deco metropolis. It's not
Yes.
the real worlds with different buildings. It's like this is a different
Yeah.
world, and you know, there's a version, and Batman the Animated Series did it as well, where like it's futuristic and throwback at the same time. Somehow it's like the
Yeah.
1940s version of the future, which I think is a really cool kind of aesthetic, and you know, we'll see what happens with that, but I as long as going in with that, I think that's a great way to.
Another thing that's really good about those cartoons, Superman's really powerful, but he struggles with stuff.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's not a god. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
has to fight those mechanical monsters, and it's a fight. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
might lose, you know what I mean? And it's like, we need a Superman that's powerful, but that, like, things are an obstacle for him. Like, it's not a given that he'll survive. You know what I'm saying? That he'll beat these things easily. And
Mm-hmm.
those cartoons, Superman wasn't a god yet. You know what I mean? He was more like an amped up Hercules. Like,
Yeah.
he could do these amazing things, but he wasn't, you know, he didn't have all the powers quite yet. And I like that.
Yeah.
So I
He
hope that
wasn't
he goes with that.
Yeah, he wasn't immobile, or you know, when like stuff would punch him like or hit him or whatever, like if it's big enough, it's going to stagger him back, and like, you
Yeah.
know, there's one of them where like somebody's shooting like a laser at him or something like that, or like a heat ray, and he has to like really fight against it, like he's like,
Yes.
you know, and that's some of the best Superman stuff, and he like puts his hand over it so he can like walk. It's not going to kill him, but it's also like it's like being in front of like a, you know, a jet of water or something like that. Like you would struggle to try to walk through that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Superman is with that stuff. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's, you know, I'm okay with him, you know, somebody shooting him and it just bouncing off. That's part of the whole
Sure.
thing.
A
But other
bullet.
stuff,
Yeah.
if it's big enough, then it, you know, or powerful enough or whatever, he has to fight it. And that's,
Yeah.
you know, it can't just be kryptonite. Like there has got to
No.
be other bits to it. So yeah, I think that's a really cool one to pull from. Next up is the Alan Moore comic, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I've not actually read this one.
Yeah, it's a really great story. It's the one that put in it kind of was the capper on the Silver Age era of Superman like
Mm-hmm.
right after Crisis, before John Byrne. It was like, we're gonna end this era. It's a great story. It's not my favorite Alan Moore Superman story. That's the one that I like the most of I think he did two, was the one they adapted for Justice League Unlimited, which is what do you I forget the name of it, but where he gets the gift,
So the
and
Superman for the man who has everything.
for the man who has everything. I
Yeah,
love that story more. Um,
Alan Moore.
there's Alan Moore, who now probably would never acknowledge that as a great story, but it is. Um, I don't know what they're going to pull from that one, because it's such a definitive end of Superman story, and this is the beginning of Superman. I do think that story really is the Fortress of Solitude plays a big part of it. You know, he spends a lot of time there. I think we're definitely going to have a lot of Fortress stuff in James Gunn's Superman.
Yeah, I do too.
And it really deals with how his presence affects those around him. There's a lot of Lois and Jimmy. It's really about his whole family.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's where the inspiration will come from, because I don't see them adapting that particular story. Like, that's an end story. So is All-Star Superman, but there are a lot of elements of All-Star Superman that have nothing to do with, you know, his final days or whatever.
Right.
Not so with this one. This was very much about, like, you know, it's saying goodbye to Superman.
Yeah, and I think, you know, based on what you're saying, like you can adapt the kind of pathos and the kind of, you know, he can be lonely without being the lonely god. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
like,
yes.
Which I think is an important distinction. Like he is friends with these people, but they don't know the real him, or, you know, like all that stuff you can go for. And it also, like, tonally, like just the image you chose, other than the, you know, him crying, which was what Gunn showed, but like the cover of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's the new Brainiac Luthor team and like all this stuff. Like it is very Silver Agey. So like I think, you know, Silver Age with the Bronze Age mentality, I think is like hopefully tonally and like aesthetically what he's going for, more so than the end, but we shall see about that. But I'll have to pick that one up. It's short, right? It's only like an issue.
It's like 2 issues, yeah.
Yeah. Also George Perez.
Yes, Kurt Swan and George Perez, two titans together.
Cannot be mad about that. Anytime I see a like a compendium coming out with George Perez art, I'm like, well, this one's got to go on the list at some point. Like I've never read
Yep.
a Avengers Kurt Busiek, but I was like, well, I'm getting that book because George Perez
Oh, it's
art.
great. Yep.
Really stoked to read that one.
Yep.
Superman Annual number 6 from 1962 was another one. When that one is like the image is just
It's
Superman.
the pinup.
Yeah, Superman, Supergirl, Bizarro, a ton of these like kind of external super characters. I think what is that Professor what's his face from Star Labs is there.
That's pre-Star Labs. It's oh gosh, who is it? I have to I know Jor-El and Lara are in the original pick. The Legion is there.
Yeah, the
Legion is
like
also, and I'm wondering if I am a big Legion fan, and I hope that we see them in whatever Gunn is going to do in his DCU. I think they're in a crucial part of Superman's lore because they're, it's sort of not a paradox, but it's sort of a time loop. Like the Legion of Superheroes are this group of teenage superheroes in the future who are inspired by Superman's adventures 1,000 years earlier, but they literally recruit him as Superboy to join their future club. And he learns how to be a hero in large part from them who were inspired by his actions as an adult. You know what I mean? And they're very much his childhood best friends. And I kind of love, I hope that at least there's a nod to them. Like I hope when we go to the Fortress of Solitude, he has in the comics, he has the statues of his friends like there. Just throw that in there so that like at some point someone else in the DCU can pick up like, let's do the Legion of Superheroes is like, and you recast Superman because he's Superboy at that point.
Mm-hmm.
You get a young kid what's like, hey, kid in Smallville, one day you're going to be this great person and we want to know you. And I think that would be great. So I hope that that's a nod to like the Legion being there. But I think overall that's just more like James Gunn saying like there's a Superman family. Like there's him hand in hand with his cousin Supergirl front and center. She's going to be a part of this. We're really going to do the large cast of characters,
And in that same token, so like the image that he shared from Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, as well as this image, and knowing that Millie Alcock has been cast as Supergirl, and that there is going to be a Supergirl movie that is directly based on whatever the heck that movie is called.
Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow.
Woman of Tomorrow, yeah. Which is great. A really, really good Supergirl book. But all of that have Krypto, the Superdog. And
Krypto, I think Krypto's going to be in it.
I think he is, and I think he must be, because Krypto is such an integral part to that Supergirl story.
Yes.
Because she takes Krypto to this other planet so that she can get drunk. It's a really funny beginning.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because they haven't officially announced her as being in this movie, but they cast her already for a movie that doesn't go into production for quite some time.
Yeah, she's in it.
She's in it. Yeah. And I wonder if we're going to get a scene with the two of them where he's like, hey, can you watch after Krypto for me or something that like where he kind of was like, the three of them are together. I mean, the fact that we're going to get a Krypto at all, like Krypto for a long time was the symbol for comic book fans of like what you don't do in Superman, because it made him too silly, and now people love Krypto. I think that like you can totally do that now. I mean, because it's a dog with a cape. It's the silliest thing ever. But James Gunn made us love a talking raccoon and a tree. He can make us totally buy into the inner turmoil and thoughts of a super dog. I believe it. You know what I mean?
And also like what's a quicker way to get somebody to like your character is make them have a dog that is also cute and smart. Like,
yes.
And can jump and like help out and stuff like that. And that's really exciting. I don't think they're going to do whatever the super horse's name is, but
Comet. No, I don't.
Horse. They're probably not
going to do that. I don't think we're doing Beppo the super monkey. I don't think we're doing Streaky the super cat. But Krypto I think is going to be there for sure. And I really think that image was James Gunn telling us that.
I think so too. Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed. All of that stuff. And just like the fact that like, it's going to have Lois, it's going to have Jimmy, it's going to have Perry White. You have to have all these characters.
Yes.
And I think, all good choices. Like he's really good at casting. There's not been one casting announcement where I'm like, because even like something as silly as Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, it's like, actually he's going to be a really good Guy Gardner, I think.
Yeah.
Like that is exactly the kind of brashness, like, cause for a long time they had like fandom wanted him for Hal Jordan, and he would have been good. I guess young Nathan Fillion would have been good. But I think he is a better choice for Guy Gardner. I think across the board.
Yeah, for sure.
If you don't know Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern, read Justice League International. Please and thank you. Okay, so after that we jump to New 52 Action Comics. Yeah, so this was obviously in 2011 by Michael Choi, and I don't know, like I think New 52 is kind of a rough sell for a lot of people. I think a lot of
Yeah.
comic fans are especially kind of jaded by that whole thing, especially where like a lot of the characters got rebooted, but not Batman or Green Lantern.
Yeah, it was a really mishandled reboot
Yeah.
because they didn't really start everything over from scratch.
Yeah.
They didn't want to disrupt sales on Batman and Green Lantern, but like the Superman stuff was a mixed bag because Grant Morrison stuff was really great, but there's only 18 issues of it.
Mm-hmm.
And what he did was go back to the beginning. He wanted to make Superman like 1938 Superman. He wanted him to be a crusader for social justice warrior, literally.
Yeah.
He was like going to politicians' houses, corrupt politicians and wife beaters and all of these, social ills of the time, Depression era, America. And his Superman was that, like, we see him start out with this, like a t-shirt and jeans,
Mm-hmm.
and a little cape attached to the t-shirt, and it was and he couldn't fly yet. Like he kind of made it so it's like, yeah, this is Superman learning his powers. There's a lot of that stuff that's really good. It's a good Elseworlds run to me. I think there's too many like vital Superman things that came later that are missing, but like as an Elseworlds story, it's pretty good. Like I like his Brainiac in it. So I think there's definitely like going to be a lot of elements they're going to borrow from that. It's
Yeah.
I need to reread it too. Like I haven't read it since it came out. And whatever, if I had mixed feelings about it at the time, but I probably had to do much more with like just the New 52 in general.
I mean, yeah, like I think we've talked about in some of our previous episodes that like I could not have been more in on DC at the time. Like that was, I got back into comics hardcore with Green Lantern. I was all in on Blackest Night and all that stuff. I was reading all the ancillary books. Brightest Day was kind of like bumming me out because there were so many books and all this stuff. And it was just, and then you get Flashpoint, which is a great story, but it's like, now we're going to do a full, like an entire reboot of the entire universe. And I was just kind of like, I don't have the energy for this. I don't have the energy for this. So I stopped reading everything.
It was a weird kind of jumping off point for me because I started really collecting almost the entire DC line when DC had done that before during Crisis on Infinite Earths when I was like 11 years old. So that was my jumping on point. And I'm like, and then New 52 happens, 25 years later, whatever it was. And I was like, is this my jumping off point? Is this where I don't have to continue to buy all of these? Because like, my Wally is gone now. And I really disliked New 52 Wonder Woman. It has a lot of critical acclaim, but there's elements of it that I, as a Wonder Woman fan, rubs me the wrong way in a big way. So it was just sort of a jumping off point. So I didn't pay as much attention to the Superman stuff as I probably should have. But I do remember the Grant Morrison stuff at least being well written and interesting.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, Grant Morrison is nothing if not talented and always has a point of view or something like that. You may not like the general vibe of some of their stuff, but like you have to acknowledge that like if you read a Morrison book, like you're going to get point of view, you're going to get like characterization, you're going to get all this stuff. And somebody who's not afraid to like shake up stuff just because like like that X-Men run is so good, but it's like that was after 40 years of doing the same continuity forever, and it's like, well, let's change some stuff. I mean, it's the same continuity, but you know what I mean, like let's change stuff up, let's not have Jean on the team, let's have only some X-Men, like, and they do some wild stuff in New X-Men. Same with Batman as well, like let's kill off let's kill off Bruce for like a whole 2 years or however long that run was, like he was dead.
It was about a year. I mean, Grant Morrison has the best runs of so many iconic superheroes concepts. I mean, X-Men, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, even like he did the 3-part Earth One, like he really kind of gets what is at the core of almost all of these concepts, like I've always seen him as sort of like the anti-Alan Moore, not like because
at least because they hate each other, but
like they're both equally talented, but Alan Moore sort of hates superheroes deep down. He really does believe that if you have this kind of power, you must be a fascist. Like, he doesn't. Grant Morrison really sees them as, like, they're not real. They're beacons of positivity. Like, they're meant to
Right.
engage our imagination. It's not about subjugating people. You know, even Batman, like, doesn't have to be that. And I vibe with that more.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know.
There's, Grant Morrison also created Professor Pig, which is one of the darkest Batman villains ever.
Totally.
And yet
Yeah.
that overall run is like really, like if you read that, like the first issue with Professor Pig, you might go, oh my God, this is so gruesome. And it is, but it's also
Yes.
like a weird, like these brothers who didn't know each other existed, like coming together and having to like work together. Cause the entire like like Batman RIP era and Batman and Son era, which, is the run right before, Bruce dies. But, like Damian has
Yeah.
respect for Dick Grayson, but like that's it. It's like really
Yeah.
hates Tim Drake. Like, and Tim Drake obviously
Yes.
goes off and has kind of like his weakest era with when he's Red Robin.
Yeah.
But that whole run where Dick has to assume the mantle of Batman because Gotham can't be without Batman. Like it just wouldn't work without Batman.
Yeah.
And then
My boyfriend was just telling me this weekend that the Batman comics he got into was the Grant Morrison era, when it's Dick Grayson and Damian. And he's like, that dynamic is so great. And
yeah,
it is. It's such a great
it's
run.
really
Like, he
good.
could make someone else be Batman and have me believe that it's Batman and care, because I'm very much usually like, no, Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Yep.
Like, he's not a legacy character. But oh my God, that Dick Grayson Batman is great.
Yeah. And then of course there was that wild, like, Bruce Wayne kind of jumping through time to get back to the present.
Crazy.
Like it's so weird. It's so weird.
It's so weird.
Like he's a pirate at one point.
Yeah.
He's like like some kind of like Puritan or like pilgrim, like warrior or something like that. It's a very strange book. But anyway, all of that is to say, like, I trust and appreciate the fact that Gunn is like such an acolyte of Grant Morrison, because I feel like not much anyway, of Grant Morrison's ethos of comic books have been adapted as of yet. Like, we have the name Negasonic Teenage Warhead, but it's very much a different character.
It's a different character.
Whereas nowadays it's like, oh God, Cassandra Nova is going to be in Deadpool, and like, like Gunn is adapting at least using as inspiration at least 3 different Grant Morrison books. So it's like, it's pretty cool. I think it's very exciting.
Well, I mean, I think of them because I'm old, but I think of them as like modern comics, but a lot of those are like now 20 plus years old.
Yeah, for sure. They've
been around long enough to become iconic themselves.
Yeah. And reappraised, because like so much of Morrison stuff is shaking stuff up. So if you're just like, if you're in the thick of it, you might go, oh, it's just too different. I get really mad about this. But like, now it's 20 years later, and like, you can look back at New X-Men and go, there was so much great about New X-Men. And the fact that like raising Emma Frost to the character she is, and not just a bad guy, really, really good stuff. Anyway, we always seem to go back to X-Men.
Yeah.
Get through the rest of these. Okay, so this one is interesting. So it's an image of Batman, or no, again, I keep saying Batman, of Superman like on trial with the JSA from JSA 2010, which is a kind of continuation of the Kingdom Come version. What do you think of, like, because Kingdom Come to me feels very much against the ethos of what
the rest
of
this what
is.
I think of this, him using the Kingdom Come stuff as a reference. I think it's going to be an opposite of Kingdom Come, like in reverse, because Kingdom Come was a story about Superman arriving after being away for many years. You have all these violent anti-hero type superheroes who are fighting amongst themselves, and he comes in as this kind of like returning beacon of light. I think you're going to get a Superman in James Gunn's world. I think there's already a superhero community. Clearly, Green Lantern's in this. Mr. Terrific is in this. Like, there's either a Justice League or at least a superhero community. And I think a lot of them are going to be jerks. And I think Superman is going to come in as this new hero who's like, there's another way. You don't have to be jerks. And I think it'll be kind of a meta commentary on, we live in the world of The Boys and all of these, jerk type superheroes, even the ones we like, Iron Man, whatever. They're all kind of assholes to a certain extent. And
Yeah,
Superman's going to come into this world that already exists. There's going to be superheroes already, and be like, you don't have to be like this.
mm,
Like, we have a responsibility to people. Like, why are you fighting each other? You know, that's what I think. That's my theory on the Kingdom Come and why he wears the Kingdom Come, a version of the Kingdom Come S shield.
yeah, like a more like a happier version, like a more like because I
Yes.
think there's yellow instead of black or
Yeah.
whatever.
Which, you know, I have a little bit, I like it, but I chafe a little bit against it because I do think that the classic Superman shield is one of the most marketable, like,
Oh,
iconic
for sure.
symbols ever. So there's a
Yeah,
little bit of me that's like, why would you use anything else? That goes for Batman too. I feel like the yellow oval with Batman,
yeah.
like, those are just two of the most recognizable brands ever. Like, you still see them everywhere.
Hmm.
Like, and for them not to use that, I don't really know why, but I think that there's I think that Kingdom Come, you know, in reverse is why they're doing it, why he's doing
Hmm.
it. You know,
That makes a lot of sense, and also like remembering that there's going to be an Authority movie, and there was another Grant
yeah,
Morrison Superman in the Authority was like a whole thing
yep,
for a while. So
yep,
okay, and the Authority is basically like a version of the Boys. They're like a violent kind of
yep,
superhero team. Okay, I'm with you on that. I think that makes a lot of sense. After that, we have Superman the animated series. Like perfect. Like it's
perfect.
I've been waiting for somebody to come out and say I'm using the Paul Dini Bruce Timm animated whatever as my jumping off point. And I think like um
It's the best
what
version of Luthor.
easily the best version of Luthor, a great version of Brainiac. A lot of like the
Yes.
Superman's rogues get revamped in a really interesting way. Like Toy Man becomes like a really creepy character instead of a
Creepy instead
weirdo.
of just, yes. Let's go back to Brainiac. That I remember when they premiered Superman the animated series, and of course I loved Batman, and I was like a little bit weird just as a longtime comic book fan when they did Brainiac because I'm like, you know, just my immediate like gut reaction was like, Brainiac's not from Krypton, you know, like Brainiac's, but it's so much better this way.
Hmm.
Like, to make him like the AI that knew that Krypton was going to fail and let it happen,
Hmm.
you know, and they're both sort of the child of Jor-El. Jor-El creates Brainiac. That's a great way to go.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to create, you know, they're almost brothers, but not.
Hmm.
You know, I really hope they use the Superman the animated series Brainiac, and I hope that that's just what that image means. I hope that they use the Luthor and Brainiac specifically, and the Lois. Lois was great. Dana
Lois is so
Delaney.
good. Dana Delaney's Lois
I
is
mean, it really,
amazing.
what Tim and Dini did with Superman the animated series is really the same as what they did with Batman. They like looked at 50 plus years of comics and like, this works, this works, this works. Let's take the best pieces of everything. There's a lot of the modern, you know, John Byrne Superman there too, because that's where that Lex comes from. The
Yeah.
idea of like LexCorp, you know,
Hmm.
and all of that
Hmm.
comes straight from the Byrne run, and they used that. But they also brought in Silver Age things that the comics had discarded. Like, okay, there are other Kryptonians
Hmm.
in the Phantom Zone. Like, there's Superman's not the only one anymore. You know, yeah, I really hope that they use as much from the cartoon as humanly possible because it's so good.
And also like just the general tone and vibe of that, like as much has been talked about with the Batman show of like they started with black paper and then drew on top of that so that it was always
Yes,
dark. Superman is blue, like is light sky blue, and
yes,
Metropolis is
it's gold.
beautiful and gold. Yeah,
Yeah,
that is my in my head. That is the version of Metropolis. Like that
yep,
is it's bright, it's happy, it is about hope, and it's just like
yeah,
Superman is there to sustain that level of kind of like a nigh utopian version of what a
yep,
city ought to be. It is
yep,
the city of the future kind of thing.
yep, yep.
Um, and that's why it's like it made no sense to me in the DCEU where like Metropolis and Gotham are across the bay from each other.
They they could have done something cool with that because they could have made it them polar opposites that
Yeah,
happen to be across, but they didn't.
they didn't.
They didn't do anything with it. They're just both New York. They're just
Yeah.
both like a version of New York. And I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, you could do something cool with that idea of like the twin cities and like one's the evil twin and one's the good twin. They didn't,
They
you
didn't.
know, but like I want them to do something cool with like Metropolis like that. It is that kind of, you know, American exceptionalism version of what we think America is versus what it really is. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, I hope they do that and give me like all the Art Deco stuff that you
Oh,
can.
please. Oh my gosh. That is it.
Yeah.
Like that. And that it's incredibly impractical, but that version, the cartoons version of the Daily Planet building with the
Yep.
giant globe on top,
You
it
need the globe.
you need it. You must have it. Like
Yeah.
it was one. It was like, okay, it's kind of fun in to make it the Flatiron Building or whatever, but it's like no. It needs to be this huge giant like. And also, it's a world where newspapers are still like trusted,
Right.
and
Right.
and just generally people like think reporting is important and all this stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, can't say enough good things about Superman the Animated Series. I think, did you write a like best Superman episodes? I forget if you, I'm sure you
No,
did at
you
some
did.
point. I did. Hey,
You
me and Kyle did.
did.
I'm the
Yeah.
one who did it.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew I remembered it.
We write a
um
lot of stuff,
we sure
listeners, so we
do.
forget.
All right. Home stretch. So penultimate one shared was a 1995, a panel from the 1995 Tim Sale, Jeff Loeb comic, Superman for All Seasons. If you've read Batman the Long Halloween et al., those books, it's the same writer and artist pair. Again, like you would look
Quintessential.
at, yeah, it's essential. And you would look at the Long Halloween and go, how would this pair make a Superman book? And they do, and it's
Mhm.
incredibly hopeful, and I love the Clark in that book. Like he's just so like, oh no, like am I gonna have to leave, like all that stuff. And
Yeah. And the art is incredible. It's
yeah,
the whole premise of that, it's like a 4-issue series, and it's Superman from the perspective of those closest to him.
yep,
And you get all the different versions. I think Pa Kent is one of them, and that's the
yeah, he's the
Smallville
first
section.
issue one, yeah, is Pa Kent.
Yeah. And you just
Yeah,
like, I hope visually like that's the Smallville that we get.
mm-hmm.
Again, at the Norman Rockwell, you know, America that probably never really existed, but like exists in our imagination. Like that kind of thing. Like I hope that that's what we get, and it's just that's a great comic, and it's short. There's 4 issues.
Yeah,
But it is quintessential Superman.
mm-hmm. And I think they must have known that was going to be a thing, because like they either are going to or just put out like a big like absolute version of it.
Yeah,
So which is like double the pages, and it's all this like commentary and stuff like they often do.
yeah.
Yeah, totally worth reading. I'm a big Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale fan from their other books, and this was the one that I hadn't read, so I was like, time to read it. It's great.
Mhm.
It's really, really good. And the image that Gunn shared is it's Clark in pajamas looking at the sunset off the farm, and it's
Yeah, the
all
cornfield.
the
Yeah.
cornfield, and the sky is like watercolor, kind of purple and yellow and orange. And he just says, you just see the back of him, and it just says, "Do you ever get tired of looking at that?" It's like, that is, again, that's Clark Kent. Like, and the cover of it is really cool. It's like Superman kind of godly looking
Yes.
above the clouds, and then
Sale draws a thick Superman too. Like it's kind of like
he is
he's
thick.
huge.
He is
Yeah.
a farm boy
Yeah, he's
through
a
and
full.
through.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's very funny. Like, because he looks like, yeah, he's just stocky. He's just
Yeah.
like, it looks like he's corn fed.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And then the final one is Action Comics 2021, which is the newest one from from existence. But
Yeah.
Action Comics is a very Lois and Clark focused book currently.
Yeah,
So
and I think it's an image of them, him kissing Lois floating in the sky. It's very romantic. It's very, telling me that like we're gonna get a lot of Lois and Clark romance in this, which is great. They're like the best couple in comics ever.
Yeah.
Like some people try to give me like Mary Jane and Peter Parker, and I'm like, they're in there somewhere, but like Lois is cooler. I'm sorry. Like she's like gets to do stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's Lois focused stories. Like
Lois had her
because
own comic for
yep.
decades.
Mm-hmm. I really liked, and then that was another thing that I was kind of like bummed about when they did DC Rebirth, which I was like all into, and then they kind of messed it up and rechanged it. But that early Superwoman book where like Lana and Lois are like teaming up to be a superhero together, I thought was cool.
Yeah. I've often debated internally, should they make Lois Superwoman once she married Superman? Like I've always, I think I've landed on no, they shouldn't, but I kind of like the idea of like, she's so prominent and in comics as, it's kind of like Wonder Woman, then Lois Lane in terms of fame, in comics, female characters, like, do you just want to give her powers? But I kind of like the idea that like, she doesn't, she's just this awesome, reporter who is, the heart of Superman.
Mhm.
You know, she's a great character and has been played great by a lot of, there's been a lot of live action versions and animated versions of Lois that are really fantastic. I
Yeah.
mean,
I'm really stoked because I don't know David Corn Sweat. I don't know, like, he looks like Superman
yes,
to me, so I'm happy about that. But
yeah,
like Rachel Brosnahan is gonna be so good as Lois Lane. Like
perfect. That's
I
who I wanted from before they even like rumored her for the
yeah,
role. Like that, because I'm a big fan of Mrs. Maisel, so I was like,
sure.
I want her. That's Lois.
Yeah.
That like plucky retro kind of attitude, like I just saw her as Lois a long time ago, so I'm thrilled that she got the part.
Yeah.
Like I can see her being sarcastic without being annoying, like calling him Smallville
Mhm.
in a way that's endearing. Like, hey Smallville, let's like that. It's she's perfect. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that was the casting. I was just like, "Oh, hell yeah." Because really, you could argue if you get Lois right, Superman is easier to fill, like, because he just has to be good.
yes,
You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah.
like, but
Lois has to be great.
Lois needs to believe him and believe in him, and that's the harder bit, I
Yeah,
think. And like Margot Kidder was good. Like I definitely liked
in
Margot
that
Kidder
first movie, she's
in
really
that
good.
first movie,
Yeah,
but she was coming at it a little more like jaded, which I think like
yeah,
Lois can. It's possible for Lois to be jaded, but I think she just needs to be forthright. I think that's kind of
yeah,
more like the world does get to her, but like she knows that she can try to make a difference, and that is what she sees in Superman and Clark. Like,
yeah.
ultimately,
We've been blessed with a lot of really good Loises. Like, say
yeah,
whatever you want. Terry Hatcher was a good Lois on Lois and Clark.
yeah,
She was really good in that. Dana Delaney in
yep.
Superman the Animated Series. And whatever I want to say about Man of Steel, I am one of the people who liked Amy
Amy
Adams.
Adams,
Like,
yeah,
I liked that she was very much a reporter. There was never any question that she didn't know who this guy was. Like, she figured it out right away.
yeah,
She was good. I didn't like that she was a redhead, but like other than that, like I was like, you're
yeah.
being paid a lot of money. Like, be brunette. like that always kind of gets my like. I'm like, it is one of the most famous brunette characters ever. Like,
Yeah, totally.
whatever. But like, but I think we've been very lucky. But I kind of have a feeling Rachel Brosnahan's going to be maybe the best one we've ever
I
had.
Oh gosh, I'm so stoked. I think, and just knowing like how much care they're actually putting into it, and like, Gunn has said multiple times, like people have asked about the Waller series that was announced, and Peacemaker season 2 and all this stuff, and he even said that like, stuff had to be switched around because of the strikes, which we know, but he's like, I'm not going to direct every episode of Peacemaker season 2 because I need to make sure that Superman,
Yeah,
my priority is making sure Superman is good and proper first.
yeah,
And I completely agree. I think that is the absolute tack to take, and I think that is going to set up the, obviously he's announced a lot of other characters that we either are going to be in the, or we assume like Supergirl are going to be in it. You have to be able to make it a Superman story that just happens to have all these. You need to, like, if he's going to come
yes,
into an existing DC world, you can't have it be, this is the DC movie. You know what I mean? Like it has to be a Superman movie first and foremost, and then the fact that the Justice League or
yeah,
whatever exists as well is just kind of there for flourish, kind of proving how Superman is different from them in some fashion,
yeah,
and that they, like, he makes them better. I think that's a cool thing. Like, it's the fact that like Guy Gardner is the kind of cocky a-hole version of Green Lantern,
yeah,
because you need to be able to make, there needs to be some growth on the side of the Green, or of the Justice League, like,
yeah,
because even they maybe have gotten kind of cynical with, people like the Authority around and stuff like that. I that's my biggest, and I think to kind of sum up, like, what is Superman, the James Gunn version, need to be in order to be a success? And I think it's just lack of cynicism on the part of the
yes. On
movie
the
and
part of
also
Superman,
on the part of Superman. Yeah.
yeah, you can have
Characters can be
cynicism,
cynical, certainly, but the movie can't
right?
be.
Yeah, the movie can't be cynical. You can have a bunch of cynical characters in the movie,
Right.
but Superman has to be the opposite of that. And I think that's what
Yep.
we're getting, just like based on these characters. They're all, well, not metamorpho, I mean, but like Guy Gardner and all these people, the Authority characters, they're cynical characters. So to
Mhm.
kind of have him show up and kind of be like, it doesn't have to be this way. Like, we serve a purpose in society that's not just our self-aggrandizement, you know.
Yeah.
um I wouldn't be surprised if the whole thing is like kind of a commentary on like the boys, and not just the
Yeah.
boys, but like
I think
all of that.
yeah.
Just this idea that like if you have powers, you're gonna just be all about yourself. And
Mhm.
I'm like, well, why? You know, I mean, the MCU did a really good job with Captain America proving that no, you don't have to be that way, and people will like you, because
Mhm.
that's always been the argument. Superman's too perfect. People can't relate to that. I'm like, people love Chris Evans Captain America, so I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you absolutely can do that. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, and that was like, again, I don't want to just keep crapping on the BVS, but it is not a good movie. But
no,
like the whole thing is like Batman is and the world, I guess, is sort of like um suspicious of Superman because he's sort of unknown and has all these powers and all this stuff, and they just assume he's going to turn bad or go bad or whatever. Um and there's nothing in the movie to refute that except for the fact that he gets killed by Doomsday and has a mom
right?
named Martha. Like that's
Yeah,
that's that's the only reason that Batman comes around, and it's he doesn't have a change of heart, and that was what was needed for that.
yeah,
Batman just stops thinking that. That's the only difference. Like he doesn't actually believe. We don't see his shift, and that
no,
is the failing of that movie. One of the many failings of that movie. Um, grandma's piss or whatever is absolutely the failing of that movie. But
I mean, they don't give a reason why people don't trust Superman, because like all they do is show him saving people in this like these montages. I'm like, so why don't you like him?
yeah,
Why is Batman so freaked out about, I don't know.
yeah, it's I mean, ultimately it's because Zack Snyder read two comics in his whole life, and
Yeah, he only
uh,
knows those comics.
he wanted to have the fight from between Batman in the big metal suit and Superman,
Yeah.
and he wanted to he retrofit the movie to make it that, and then Warner Brothers was like, well, we gotta keep having him in movies because he's a big character, and so then they
And
like, let's do
there's nobody at Warner Brothers who knows what these things are. Like,
yeah,
until recently anyway, like until you had James Gunn running DC Studios, you don't have a DC Studios, number one. You just have executives who don't know from comics.
yeah,
They just know the IP that they own.
right,
And that's it. That's the big difference between like a Feige who is a comics fan,
yep,
and they just didn't have. They were lucky with Chris Nolan, because whatever you think about, Chris Nolan clearly loves Batman the character and
mm-hmm.
knows his Batman lore. It's all over those movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he likes any other superheroes particularly,
No,
but he knows Batman and he knows Batman comics. It's there, so we got lucky. But nobody else really had that affinity, you know, almost, and it showed. So that's why I feel Gunn knows, like clearly by the things he's posting and has posted over the last year, he knows his Superman.
yep,
He's not gonna make it. He's not gonna. It's. I know he did that like evil Superman movie himself, or produced it, whatever, the one with a bright, and people were worried it was gonna be that. I'm like, no, like he understands that this is something else.
no, no,
He's already done that movie, by the way. So it's like, why
well,
is he
yeah.
gonna do? Yeah,
No, I think he also understands the gravity of like, I need to make Superman again.
yeah,
He needs to stop being Homelander, because there is a Homelander, and it like you
yeah,
can't, and like your point, you can't subvert a Superman if there's no Superman to subvert.
yeah.
Like it's just showing that everybody who has Superman's powers and status is just going to be evil and eventually kill a bunch of
Yeah.
people and get away with it or whatever. And it's like, we live in a world where that is very, like, even without
That's
superpowers,
real.
that's real. So
Yeah,
why would I want to watch that in my superheroes? Like,
yeah.
that's why I know The Boys is good. Like, I know it in my heart,
It's
but I
really
can't
good.
watch it because I don't want that in
I
my,
know.
I
I
don't
get
need
it.
that.
I get it. It's yeah. It's a little bit too close to home sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
It's,
we don't have distance from any of these things in the world. You know what I'm saying? Like, which I think is important. It's important to have media that comments on things that are going on, which
yeah.
I think a lot of stuff has been scared to do until recently. Like entertainment, like the big entertainment blockbusters have been like, well, we don't want to talk about what's anything going on politically. We want to appeal to everyone. So they've just been escapism, and that's
Mhm.
important. But I do feel like I do like that The Boys does that. But I get why someone might not want to watch it,
Yeah.
especially the more they lean into the Homelander of it all.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
there's a chance here for Gunn's Superman to comment on all that stuff that
Yes.
these other shows are commenting on it, but showing the other version.
Yeah.
There is a better way. Like, Superman needs to be a beacon not just of power, but of wholesomeness. Not the
Yes.
American way, but the humanity way. Like, this
Yeah.
is the way people ought to live. Whether you have a super strength or not.
Yeah. I really do
Spider-Man is
think,
close to that,
yeah.
but I think Superman has a better chance of it.
Yeah. And I really do think next year the entire world is going to fall in love with Crypto. I think Crypto is going to be
Yep.
like, I just feel like that, like you said, you want to make Superman relatable, give him a dog.
Yep.
You know, and if that dog can fly, even better. You know, if that dog bites bad people, mean people, like, we're just going to automatically love it.
Yeah. So if you at home have, or in your car, I don't know where you listen to this, haven't read any of those comics, I would recommend them. Eric would recommend them. You can also read Eric's list of the best comics runs. It came out December, so just a couple months ago. The 10 greatest Superman comic book runs ranked. You can find that on Nerdist.com. Really great stuff on there. From writers you definitely know and other ones you maybe haven't heard of, like, that wasn't listed here, but like, Mark Waid's run, Superman Birthright. And then you also have Peter Tomasi, which we mentioned a little bit, but also Jeff Johns' run, which is, he wrote a bunch of other characters and kind of doesn't get talked about for his Superman work. So that's really interesting. But Eric, how can people get a hold of you see your thoughts on the internet if they want to do that?
I am still on the Twitter at GeekBoyEric, and you can find me there. I am very active in that hell site.
Someone has to be.
Somewhere I am. And on Instagram too, same, at GeekBoyEric.
You follow me on Instagram at Kyle_Anderson. Nope. Functional_nerd. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Kyle_Anderson. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, of course, for joining me, Eric, and talking as always about superheroes. And you'll be back to do it again many more times. Join me again next week on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.